Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I have more female athletes who are speaking out and standing up for women's sports. In particular, a veteran female boxer, Cary Williams, is speaking out about the whole USA boxing and their new rules that allow biological males to compete against women in boxing of all sports. Apparently, if you keep your testosterone to a certain level, that makes you a woman. That makes it appropriate for a male to compete in female boxing, where the likelihood of injury, of even death, is greater, especially when up against a man. Oh, they also require the male athletes to go through the gender reassignment surgery. So you could argue that these are some of the strictest requirements that is demanded from a sporting body when it comes to their gender policy. Some people think that's enough, that this is fair, that makes them equal when they get into the ring, that there's no, unnecessary danger against the female athlete because the testosterone levels are lower. But as you can imagine, female athletes are speaking out, including the boxers. One of the first female boxers to speak out was Bethany Hamilton. We've had coaches speaking out, former boxers, current boxers, and now Cary Williams is weighing in on the whole situation. So here's a recap about the whole gender policy from USA Boxing.
USA Boxing now has allowed a new transgender policy which will enable biological men to compete against women in the ring. Brian Brenberg, co-host of the Big Money Show on Fox Business, Fox News contributor Joe Concha here to talk about it. Both are boxers in their own right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, men and women in the ring, what could go wrong, Joe?
What could go wrong? Here's the thing. My wife was a Division I athlete at Georgetown, right? She's not a political person in any way, shape, or form. She's too busy taking care of my kids, doing the doctor thing. But when it comes to this topic, suddenly the mood, face, and passion completely comes to the forefront. And she makes a very good argument. And that is, if you ban steroids or HGH being used by Division I athletes, professional athletes, because it gives them a chemical and biological advantage, then how do you not do the same for the chemical and biological advantage that we see when men compete against women, especially boxing, by the way? You know how many deaths there have been in boxing in the history of the sport? Nearly 2,000, either in the ring or sustained after the fact, and you're going to put women in there with men? It's a whole bowl of wrong, guys.
To me, this isn't a complicated question.
No.
It's like, shouldn't happen. So what am I missing?
Well, this is the problem with a topic like this. You don't even know how to answer it in some ways because you're like, are you kidding me? Boxing inherently is about violence. The idea is to incapacitate your opponent as quickly as possible. And anybody knows who's played a sport like that, played college football, when you come at somebody, I don't care what kind of treatments you've had or what kind of appendages you have, you are going to harm them by design. So like that's the thing here. It's harm that's going to happen.
I should have done this before. This is what USA Boxing says is the eligibility requirements for transgender female boxers. You have to have completed gender reassignment surgery, quarterly hormone testing for a minimum of 4 years after surgery, total testosterone level must remain a certain level. And it's all nonsense.
It's called nanomoles.
Whatever that's called.
Whatever that is.
You know, South Park predicted this like 5 years ago.
Yes, they had a great Macho Man Randy Savage going in and kicking everyone's butt. You're like, yeah, that would be stupid. That's good for comedy. And now we're living the comedy.
Right.
And this is all under the guise of inclusion. A sport where the aim is to knock your opponent out. That's the ultimate aim, not to win on points. It's to knock your opponent out. So you have males who are going to get into the ring with women with the aim of knocking them out. Absolutely barbaric. Absolutely barbaric. Now, female boxing, I've seen some images of Bethany Bridges after a fight. It was horrific. Let's just put it that way. Absolutely horrific. And this is against another woman. So can you imagine the sort of injuries we are going to see if women get into the ring with men? Can you imagine? I don't even want to imagine. And I believe that majority of female boxers, if not all of them, are dead against this for fear. We saw with jiu-jitsu, the women were literally in fear about having to compete against a trans woman. And some of them actually went head to head with biological males. And they said it was something that they had never experienced before in their lives. So it'll be interesting to see if any female boxers actually get into the ring. But let's see what veteran boxer Cary Williams has to say.
I've been with USA Boxing for over 20 years, and being a coach with them, they're really geared towards safety. That's one of the things when you do testing, they have safety sport and the works. So when I heard that they were allowing transgender people to box women, I could not believe it. I know it's been going on in a lot of sports, which is not right and on any level. But when you're talking about people punching each other in the face, in the body, in the head, I really was surprised.
It's as if all logic is thrown out of the window to accommodate male athletes who want to identify as women. They throw out all logic, they throw out all principles regarding safety. It's as if those things no longer exist or aren't as important as appeasing the interests of trans athletes at the expense of everybody else, apparently, at the expense of women. They always want to accuse people who don't go along with this as being transphobic. Well, I will say this is misogynistic. You're happy for males to get into the ring with women to beat them black and blue. That's misogynistic to me. Or to accommodate men who want to identify as women. We forget about unfair advantages. We forget about safety. We forget about fairness. We forget about competitiveness and the integrity of the sport. We forget about records that go down in history. We forget about maintaining the integrity of such records, or to bow to gender ideology, which is ruining women's sports. Now, there are some trans men who participate in boxing. Well, not some, I think I can only think of one. And this policy also has, rules for trans men, women, or biological females who want to compete against men. And so far, I can only think of one boxer who has been able to do that. They didn't qualify for the Olympics. I would guess that a male athlete who enters the ring in women's sports will probably qualify for the Olympics and get a lot further than a trans man would get competing against men. So we're going to see athletes come out the woodwork, athletes who weren't as successful when they were competing against men, all of a sudden rise to the highest of ranks in women's boxing.
This is going to be a huge barrier for the young women coming up, for the young girls coming up in the sport of boxing, because first of all, boxing is a very challenging sport. Actually, ESPN did a study. It is the toughest sport out of all sports. They did this whole kind of, tally of, mental strength, physical strength, speed, agility, and all those things. So you look at that and obviously, you can get hurt, it's a little painful when you get hit. So, you already know there's a lot of girls that aren't necessarily interested in getting into it. But once they do, they've overcome that part of it. Now you're adding this layer of, now you might have to box a boy or a man. You put that in front of them and they're going to say, well, then I don't want to box.
Because as much as you pee on our legs and tell us it's raining, we know that we will be going up against men. Well, not me, because I'm not a boxer. But they know what this entails. I think it was Cary who spoke about sparring with men. And even with sparring, you can see a distinct difference. And the men go easy on the women, even with sparring. They're careful because they know they're stronger. They know their punch will do more damage. She said it was a 16-year-old she was sparring with. And he was going easy on her because that is an unspoken rule in boxing. If you're sparring with a woman, if you're a man sparring with a woman, you're respectful and you go light on her. You don't go all out and try and knock her out, for goodness sake. In all seriousness, she may very well not come back up. And this is what is being allowed by USA Boxing, whose aim should be to protect their athletes, all of their athletes. But instead, they're permitting something that is going to put the lives of many female athletes in danger.
When I was about 30 years old, I was preparing for a fight. And at the time, there were a lot of teenage boys on the boxing team at the gym. So I sparred with a lot of teenage boys, and there weren't as many women boxing in the sport around that time. So I was sparring with a 16-year-old boy, and they all still went light on me, even though they were boys. They still went light on me. And he flicked in a body shot and fractured one of my ribs. It was hairline, but it hurt like hell. And, and he didn't mean to do it. And I just thought, wow, like the power behind a teenage boy. I couldn't imagine, being hit by a grown man. So yeah, I mean, that just experience, it takes me to this whole nother level of thought, thinking if they're really going to allow men to go in there and box with women, that is just deadly. I mean, there's really no other way to look at it. I would say 99.9% of anybody that I have talked to or had a conversation about this particular subject, they are 100% on board with what I think about it, which is that it's ridiculous and it shouldn't be happening. There's just no way that a man should be able to come into a boxing ring and box with a woman, no matter what. If they're born a man, then they're a man. It doesn't matter if they have gone through transition, if they're, if their steroid levels are at a certain level, according to USA Boxing, none of that matters. So yeah, I think most of the people that I have communicated with feel the same way.
So she broke a rib when sparring with a 16-year-old who went easy on her because she's a woman. She still ended up with a broken rib. So of course, you can only imagine what it's going to be like with an actual grown man. And just because a male athlete decides to take hormones, decides to go through gender reassignment surgery, and potentially lower their performance against other men, your performance may decline to a certain degree because you are on estrogen now and your testosterone levels, have tanked. So yeah, you may put yourself at a disadvantage against other men. That doesn't mean that you are now equal to females. And then using that to say that this is fair. A man who has taken estrogen is taking it upon himself to take estrogen and to do whatever surgery doesn't mean that that person is now a female and the same as a female. Because obviously, women are not castrated men. Women are not men whose testosterone has tanked. That doesn't make one a woman. That doesn't make one the same as a female athlete. It doesn't. But yet they're equating that to fairness. And that is what is going to put safety in jeopardy. That is what is going to put lives in jeopardy. Most women, I would think, would not want to enter the ring with a trans woman. Absolutely no way. But there are some women, who knows? They might be like, I can beat this person. Go in there, not knowing what they're getting themselves into, and then find themselves in a situation that they can't come back from. This is a position you're putting female athletes in, and it's unacceptable. And again, she said most of them agree with her, if not all. Something that is already dangerous to begin with.
But a lot are worried to speak out. We live in a weird cancel culture. And so I think a lot of people don't want to voice their opinions on it, which is really sad because we need more people to stand up on this. For individuals to be emotional and base things off of ideology instead of, actual reality and science, it's beyond my belief. I can't really comprehend what goes through their minds. But I'll tell you what, if they're going to say that I'm this, that, or the other thing, the issue is if somebody decides that they want to transition, a man wants to transition to be a woman. That is a big decision in life. And they can make that decision. But when they make that decision, there are consequences that come with that decision. And one of them is that they cannot compete as a woman in the sport of boxing or any other sport. They have to take that into account when they make that decision in their life. I think that is only fair. So again, it's just, we all make choices in life and there are consequences to the choices that we make.
Very well said. And like she mentioned, people are afraid to speak up. Since when was it offensive to say that a woman shouldn't get into the boxing ring with a man? Just a few short years ago, people wouldn't argue with that. People wouldn't dispute that. They would say, of course not. Unless you have a death wish. But now it's offensive to say that. Even if you're a trans woman, whatever, you're still a male. And anybody with any sense knows that a woman getting into the boxing ring with a biological male is at a very clear disadvantage and is at a greater risk of getting hurt. That is common sense. But again, all of that gets thrown out of the window, and now we're cancelling people for saying that. We're calling people bigots for saying that. And even sporting bodies who have a lot of power, who have a lot of authority, are afraid to go along with reality. Instead, like she said, they're going along with an ideology. Sporting bodies who know better. Let's just be real, these sporting bodies know better. But they're playing the game, they're going along with it, they want a pat on the back, they want to be inclusive, all at the expense of women. Since when was it okay to hurt the interests of one group to elevate another group? Since when was that okay? I thought we were all supposed to be equal. But if you decide that you want to identify as a woman and do all of this stuff to your body, that's your choice, but that doesn't mean that you now get to be in women's sports. Since when is that okay? Why did we say that it was okay to be in women's sports just because you want to identify as a woman? If I identify as a pilot, that alone doesn't mean that anybody's going to allow me to fly a plane. No one is going to allow me to fly a Boeing 747, DEI or not. So let's end on the palate cleanser. Riley Gaines and Bethany Hamilton were recently at a library speaking up for women's sports and introducing them to some wholesome material, unlike Drag Queen Story Hour and things like that they're doing at children's libraries now. So let's take a look.
Families gathered in the hundreds for a book reading at the Library Center tonight. Two speakers have been crossing the country talking about their opposition to trans athletes in women's sports. The talks are led by pro surfer Bethany Hamilton and former University of Kentucky swimmer Riley Gaines. Michael Hoffman joins us live with the variety of reactions from the crowd. Michael.
Well, Paul, Gaines and Hamilton read their books to the kids in the Library Center behind me. Those books are centered around overcoming obstacles in life, and the line of parents eager to hear from the two athletes actually was out the door and around the sidewalk. Now, there were also protesters here who wanted to make sure there was fair representation.
It's giving them a great opportunity.
Parents like Kara Holt filed into a small room in the Library Center to hear from Hamilton and Gaines. Holt says she always jumps at the opportunity to expand her kids' minds, and it doesn't hurt that her daughter is a huge fan of Hamilton.
I am trying to expose them to anything to help them learn about, their feelings and how they would overcome obstacles.
Others, however, had a different idea. Hamilton and Gaines have made headlines nationwide, voicing their opinions on trans athletes in women's sports.
Yeah, I've been traveling state to state across the nation to really advance legislation that would ultimately preserve and uphold the safeguarding of women, our opportunities, and our privacy in areas of undressing.
Once word spread, members of the LGBTQ community decided to attend, spreading the word about a possible protest.
We honestly just wanted to provide visibility through inclusive shirts, inclusive flags, to include all people that represent all of Springfield, because it's not just represented by what we're seeing here.
Others, like Missouri Secretary of State hopeful Valentina Gomez, came in support of the athletes.
I'm a former Division I college swimmer. I got my MBA at Tulane, full-ride scholarship, just like Riley Gaines, and we're fighting for our children. That's why I got invited. I'm fighting for Missouri. She's fighting for the children. She's fighting for women's spaces.
When Holt and her husband heard about the protest, they had second thoughts about attending. But at the end of the day, those caught in the middle, like Holt, say it's all about the kids.
Teaching kids how to do different things and overcoming fears and obstacles is okay.
So that was nice. Great attitudes there. Great message. Even the trans activists seemed to behave themselves. I didn't hear of any, incidents. But a great message. And Rip Curl are definitely feeling the backlash, especially since they snubbed Bethany. I think it's one thing to have a trans athlete representing women for your brand, but it's another thing to snub such an inspirational female athlete who is the example, who exemplifies overcoming obstacles. So your loss, Rip Curl. I think they seem to be backtracking, backpedaling, but it's too late. So great to see the work that Bethany and Riley are doing there. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.